rock it like he's so. Rock it like he's so. Morning, everyone. How's everyone doing this morning? Hey? Going to be figuring out the next stage of our cross stitch. Michael working? Michael working fine. There we go. Oh, that's still blistering hot. Where's our pattern? Ah, there it is. There it is. Going to be, I should switch over to that view there. There we go. Going to be figuring out I've got the color picked already, the dark suns. I think are going to be the next section that we mark out. Actually, we've got some false oranges in the area. What other color can we use? There it is. There it is. There it is. There it is. We've got some false. I suppose we could use red. I had one other color in this box, and I can't remember what the other color was. There were 6 colors in here. Surprised that I can't remember what the other color was. Can't even remember when I lost it. Okay, right. So basically from there up, and then there's one dot there. So I'm gonna do that. These are washable, which is really, really handy. The other thing that's nice about this whole thing is it just means I don't have to crick my neck up and down as I do a stitch, which is really rather handy. Oh, you wouldn't believe, not last night I slept fine. But the night before, I went to bed early and it completely messed me up. It just threw off my rhythm. I actually got more sleep than I normally get on Monday night. And it just wrecked me. It just completely and utterly wrecked me. Which I find hilarious, because I'm like, everyone's like, oh, you should always get enough sleep. I'm like, also don't get too much sleep. Because some people need 8 hours. I don't need 8 hours. I need a solid 6. And when I say a solid 6, I mean, you know, actual sleep for 6 hours, not in bed for 6 hours. So there is a distinction there. But I need a solid 6. I can get by with less than 6. But I want 6, like my body wants 6. Okay, so there must be more dark suns than this. I'm sure there were more dark suns than this. Got such a lovely color picked out for these dark suns. Such a shame if we don't have more. Is that all of them? Appears like that's all of them. Where's the fish? That fish does not have any dark suns. That fish, no dark suns. Well, that's really not that many. For some reason, I thought the dark suns were going to be a much bigger thing for us. Maybe we should do another color. Ooh, the squares, or the upside down triangles. Upside down triangles we've done, right? Yeah, upside down triangles we have done. Let me get a totally different color so I don't muddle myself. Got any blue on it? No, we haven't got any blue on the pattern at the moment. Morning, morning. How are you doing? Yeah, I moved the chat off just because it was taking a lot of screen space. I need to look into what things I can hook up into YouTube without any bother. Okay, yeah, I think we'll do the squares. So to do the squares, we're going to have to go from... Yeah. That was the other thing. Catching up on some Ascendance of the Bookworm, because Monday is the pre-pub day. Always exciting. I have a writing project that I do want to kick off at some point soon. Got a lot of writing stuff on my plate at the moment. I need to get pages done for the skate comic because I haven't done any pages for the skate comic in a while. It's one of the projects that needs a little bit of TLC. But at the moment, as I've been getting back into it, I've really been on a bit of a cross-stitch binge at the moment. Really has been rather fantastic. Do you know, I think we can safely say everything up until... So I think... I'm just checking that this is correct. Yeah, I think everything up until... And just check the crest. Oh, this would be delightful if this is the case. It is the case. Okay. With the exception of the eyes. So with the exception of those eyes there, Nessie is basically a fill-in solid color, which is fantastic. That's absolutely fantastic because that means we can just block her in like that. Oh wait, these are the, before we move off of these, we need to check if there's any other, what are they, half squares, because I think there's some half squares on the fish. Yeah, there are. There are half squares on the fish. Oh wow, so whatever we use for whichever floss we use for the half squares, we are going to murderize, absolutely murderize. So Elle, you haven't mentioned any projects you're working on. Are you working on any projects at the moment? Always good to talk. So the big thing with projects is this great bit of psychology research around how you should talk about projects. And a lot of it is based around reward centers in your brain. You should never talk about finishing projects, and you should not talk about your goals. So like, for instance, if you say to someone, I'm going to run a marathon, that's actually not very good, because your brain envisions like the end goal and the social communication of the completion of the event. Basically, you simulate the completion and you get a partial reward hit, because your brain's actually really, really shit at telling reality apart from fiction, because, well, your brain has to be really good at hallucinating stuff, because that's like one of your brain's main jobs. People don't realize this, but like one of the reasons the human brain is so powerful is because it's constantly tripping balls, which is hilarious to me. It's absolutely hilarious to me that the brain is like just totally unreliable, and by design totally unreliable. But that is the case. That's how it works. Okay, over here. Yeah, I think straight after stream I might just hop in the shower and take a really nice hot shower and just sort of separate out the morning stream from the work day, because it's always a thing I need to do. But yeah, so your brain, really, really good at tripping balls. It's kind of what your brain does, because your brain has to simulate things. Your brain has to go, oh right, I'm hunting this animal in the wilderness. I need to be able to think what's going through their brain. But the reality of the situation is you're not telepathic, so really you're simulating an idealized model of what you think is going on in that wild boar's brain, so you can predict if it's going to run left or right and how it's going to react to your hunting behavior, right? This is the empathy hunter conscious model discussion stuff. Anyway, I'm not a brain science person. Read up on some stuff, and I did one of my degrees in philosophy that was very tied up into human consciousness stuff. But anyway, so you've got to do that. So your brain has to basically run a simulation, and when your brain runs a simulation, it can't like your higher consciousness is able to distinguish fact from fiction. That's like what your brain does. But your sensorium and like the part that's simulating it, it's easier for your brain just not to. It's like if you're running a virtual machine on a computer, telling you're on a virtual machine inside the virtual machine is actually significantly difficult. And yeah, you can tell, but most of the time, most of the things that have been done inside the virtual machine just don't care. So anyway, that's about your brain simulating, your brain tripping balls and that. So when you're talking about goals and when you're talking about projects, if you say, I'm going to run a London Marathon or whatever, I'm going to run the London Marathon, people congratulate you. You congratulate yourself, even though you haven't yet run it. Most people aren't interested in running a London Marathon. So the conversation you'll have with most people is like, oh, congratulations, that's really interesting, da 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 da, that kind of stuff. And your brain will simulate, oh, you've run the London Marathon, because really, how different is it from telling people, I'm going to run the London Marathon, to, oh, I've run the London Marathon? The conversation and the social interaction, at least with most people, will go very, very similar. And so basically this kills some of your motivation, because you've already got the reward to some extent. It's a simulated false reward, but realistically you've already got the reward. So your brain's not very kosher at like separating that out. However, if you say, oh, I'm training I've been doing a lot of running training or whatever. Talk about your process. You talk about the things you're doing. You don't talk about the goals. That is actually very positive, because allows you to discuss what you've been up to, engage, find other people who are interested in the hobby or the activity, get advice. It gives your brain time to, because you're talking about what you were doing, reflect and frame, and there's a bunch of social kudos that comes with it. And yeah, so talking about process is very, very important. So, I don't say, oh, I have cross-stitched the delay. I say, oh no, I've been really enjoying cross-stitch lately. I've been doing da-da-da and working on this pattern and stuff. And I don't, talk about finishing. Likewise with programming projects and other hobby projects. Just try to talk about the process more. But it is good to talk about that. And then you have some social accountability, because basically the other thing that happens with that is next time you see that particular friend or co-worker or whatever, they go, oh, how's the running going? How's the cross-stitch going or whatever? And then you're like, oh, actually I haven't been doing it much lately, or I've been slacking off or whatever. It's a little bit of a kick in the butt to get back to doing it. Little bit of a kick in the butt to get back to doing it. I know I've made a really short floss and I may regret it. But there's really not much of this colour I need to do. I just need to do French. So let's see how this goes. Let us see how this goes. That I will need in a sec. Oh yes, I need to pick inner colour for Nessie. Should we do that first? Let's do that first. Let's pick Nessie's colour. Okay, now in the pattern, look at the pattern. In the pattern, the hollow squares are a very sort of light turquoise. I think I want something close to that, but not quite that. Okay, we can rule out everything in that bag. Yes, we can rule out everything in that bag. That's an interesting. No, that's too light. It's got to be darker than the highlight there. Oh, well, that's interesting. Two very interesting colours. I think that might actually be a really good shout there. What do you think? 3817. So yeah, 3817. I think that will be a good shout for Nessie's main colour there. Gonna pop that there because I think actually, let me pop it back in here until I decide I'm going to use that one. Otherwise I'll confuse myself and think, oh yeah, you selected that colour to do something with. Pop that on the floor so I don't have to organise it right now. And we will wind this one and then we'll get back to cross stitch, because I'm gonna have to wind that thread relatively soon, and I don't want to have to split my attention because my brain's already in there, ready in that space. It's been good to get back to these and just use this morning time as like, you will make progress on this thing. It's good. It's good. Also has been kicking my ass out of bed, which let me tell you, is not easy. It's not easy to get me out of bed. I'm very much a wake up when I want to wake up kind of person. But it has been useful. It's been extremely, extremely useful. But yeah, so talking about projects, very, very useful. That's why I always poke people, find out what their projects are, what they're up to, what have they been studying. It's like if I'm skating and I come across people that I haven't seen in a while, or I come across someone new, and I'm like, hey, what are you working on today? And a lot of people would just be like, I'm just skating or whatever. I'm like, oh, okay, let me show you a trick, or let me show you a thing or whatever. And because people enjoy things more when they have a thing to work towards. It doesn't even have to be a formalized thing. Like, you don't have to make everything a competition or strive for self-improvement or whatever, but you know, you can just make it a game sometimes. It's like, so sometimes I'll say to someone like, oh, what are you working on? And they're like, oh, just skating about. And I'll be like, oh no, I'm working on this, and and I show them what I'm working on. And then if they can already do that trick, they're like, oh, well, actually this is how you do it, and they offer me help. If they can't do that trick, they're either like, oh, I can't do that, as in like they think they're pretty close to it and they can learn it. Maybe they want to practice it with me, or they're like, oh no, that's way too far on my range. I'm like, oh well, here's the simpler version, and I'll show them the simpler version, and you know, engage and all that stuff, go through it. As I say, it's just really handy to work through that stuff with people and give people structure and motivation. Sorry, I'm winding off camera there. I didn't realize how far off camera I am. And there we go. Do you know what? Actually, I doubt. Grab this. I doubt I'm going to be needing that much. There we go. I doubt I'm going to be needing to show that area much. Come on. Yeah, I kept on thinking about maybe popping in some copyright-free music, and I was like, why bother? Why bother? Because I'm not listening to music at the moment because I'm focusing, and if I'm listening to music, my brain might just drift off into the music. And the other thing is, honestly, people's musical tastes are different, and you can just pop on whatever music you want. It's not necessary, though it is nice to create a vibe and share a thing, so maybe I should look into it. I don't know. At the moment, my intention is very much it's tangential to what I'm doing, and I'd rather not put on a track that's people aren't vibing with. And my bigger concern, as I say, is that I'd get lost in the music, which is a fair concern, trust me. For Andrew Callahan, you know, the Channel 5 News YouTube posted an interview with Tom Hanks's son. Yeah, the conversation around appropriation of culture is a really fascinating one. It's a dangerous one. It's not a dangerous one. It's one we should talk about. I'm always nervous when people say like, oh, that's a bit dangerous topic, you shouldn't talk about it. And it's like, well, we should talk about it, or more accurately, we should poke people to talk about it, and a lot of other people should just listen. Because listening is a very important part of that conversation. Very, very important part of that conversation. I think very often people are like, I have opinions, and you're like, is your opinion useful in this situation? It's always a useful metric. Like, are you an expert? Do you have personal lived experience? Do you have a minority viewpoint? Because if you have a minority viewpoint, that's usually worth airing. Doesn't mean it's valid. It just means it's worth airing. Because Yeah, this is a fascinating thing that I think people don't realize. I mean, so one of the things is we're trying to adjust for a lot of cultural phenomena to adapt to new social structures, people living in big groups. None of this is a big surprise to anyone. But a lot of people, for instance, don't realize that shame is a key component to how humans work socially, because your brain is keyed to be very, very aware of social shame or social disgrace, because one of the easiest ways to die as a hunter-gatherer is for your tribe to shun you and your tribe to throw you out. But then on the flip side, one of the things we have, typically in very low percentages, but unfortunately because of the megaphone effect of the internet. So for example, CEOs are psychopaths. Successful CEOs are psychopaths. We know this. There's been countless studies on this. Because most people don't need to be a CEO, and the psychological behavior acquired from a successful CEO under capitalism is psychopathic. Is what it is. That's a thing, right? But the thing is not many people are CEOs. Likewise, there is a group of people whose brains are wired to be counterculture, and this again is a healthy thing for society in small amounts, because they push and question our social norms. They help us evolve away from what mathematicians call, oh dear, mathematicians don't call it oh dear, that's just me going oh dear because I went through the wrong hole. Oh dear. Concept that mathematicians and data modelers call a local minimum or maximum. So if you imagine wavy lines with peaks and valleys, big mountains and stuff, if you've only ever lived near a rather shallow valley and a small hill, and I tell you, walk to the top of the tallest thing, if you can see, I don't know, a kilometer, then the hill you walk up is this little hill at the base of your village. However, if you have binoculars, or you have a map, or you have other knowledge, or someone got really drunk one day and ran very far away and then came back talking about a big tall mountain, then you know that, well, actually, if you want to climb the tallest, you've got to go further than you can see to this big mountain. And that is effectively what the job of counterculture weirdos is to get drunk, run off and find tall mountains. Doesn't mean they're very good at climbing them, doesn't mean they're successful, doesn't even mean they're happy, doesn't mean that their genes are, we don't want necessarily a ton of counterculture people, because then society breaks down. But they're extremely, extremely useful. That being said, with modern internet trends and amplification of the 1 in a million event, counterculture has now become culture in some cases, which is fine, because counterculture becoming culture is the normal process. But the bigger problem is when the act of being contrary to culture becomes culture. When the act of pushing away from the mainstream becomes the mainstream. There's a difference between counterculture people find out that eating the blueberries is really, really good, and then everyone starts eating the blueberries. That's the adoption of counterculture. But when counterculture itself, the behavior of eating randomly colored berries in the forest, becomes the trend. Well, a lot of people eat poison berries. So yeah, it's interesting. It's interesting. It's like there's a lot of societal stuff like that you don't want to occur at scale, but you do want to have in society. Basically, a healthy society has minorities. It's a weird thing to wrap your head around, but hey, it's there. It is there as a thing, and you've just got to deal with it. Like, if I'm trying to think of another good example of that whole model that's not just a derivative of what I've just said. It's rather difficult, actually, now that I think it through. Because, I mean, all the arguments about whether or not depression's necessary and anxiety and a bunch of neural divergence stuff, it's basically the same berry story, just told differently. Oh, here's a good one. There was a mathematical modeling study on integration and segregation of culture. Obviously, this is usually looked at through the race lens, but there's a lot of other lenses you can look at it. You know, political. You could look at it through. Well, let's look at it through skating. There's a non-controversial one. So skating, naturally, like any hobby, segments, right? So you've got quad skaters, you've got inline skaters, aggressive, and da-da-da. Now, these kinds of skaters prefer different surfaces, different practice areas. They have different requirements, right? You know, an aggressive skater is going to want to be able to grind. They're going to want to have wax surfaces. They're going to want kick ramps, things like that. Inline skaters, if they're street skaters, are going to want big streets to skate. If they're slalomers, they're going to want a flat, smooth area to set up their cones. You know, if they're sliding, they're going to want a surface that's good for that. You know, range of conditions. Now, here's the thing, though. Because of these range of conditions, and because you tend to want to hang out with people who are doing the same part of the hobby as you, there's a tendency to only hang out with the community members who are doing the part of the activity that you're doing. And we've done a bunch of mathematical modeling, and even if you take a random population of, say, 100 people, a million people even, and you arbitrarily assign, so you don't account for any exposure, predisposition, whatever, you arbitrarily assign a color to them. So whether they're a quad skater, an inline skater, whatever, arbitrary assignment. But you make them unhappy unless there's, bear in mind, there's like a 2D grid, like a chessboard. So you've got 8 neighbors. You make them unhappy unless they have, I think it was like 2 neighbors or 3 neighbors that are the same color as them. So in this case, are into inline skating, into slalom, whatever, right? This preferential selection over time, and selections very, very quickly, drives us towards segregation. The speed at which it drives us towards segregation is driven by that number of how many of your neighbors have to be like you for you to be happy, right? But ultimately, always leads to segregation. This is not good, because obviously quad skaters can learn from inline skaters. There's a whole bunch of stuff that can go on there, right? So, what's the solution? Tried tuning the parameters, they tried doing all kinds of stuff. Then it became very simple. You say to people, be unhappy if you don't have, I mean, this is obviously simulation, so we're just setting the premises or whatever. But be unhappy if you don't have, I think it was 2 or 3 neighbors like yourself, but then also be unhappy if you have, I think it was 7 or 6 neighbors who are like yourself. So basically, be unhappy. If you're able to identify you are in a bubble of only quad skaters, say, then that should cause you discomfort and unhappiness. So a way to codify this is, if socially you become uncomfortable and awkward with a monoculture of whatever axis you're trying to perpetuate, then people will actively seek out diversity. And the moment people actively seek out diversity for diversity's sake, even in small quantities, segregation does not occur. Isn't that interesting? Isn't that interesting? It's a very minor effect that we have to apply to the social system to solve a very inherent problem. But it's such a counterintuitive bit of behavior that we have to introduce into the system. Basically, we have to be upset if everyone around us is like us. And I thought that was rather fascinating, little behavioral modeling thing. And ever since I saw that study, I mean, I generally, I try to seek out new experiences and stuff. I'm definitely one of those mutations in the algorithm that is seeking out new minimum and maximum. It's definitely, shall we say, my social role in things, has been for a long time. Are we happy with this? We happy with this? Yeah, we're happy with this. But yeah, ever since that happened, I have outside, because it's been a long time, I first came across that. So the person who did a really good visualization that drove it home for me is, I'm going to mess up their full name, but it's like Nikki Case or something. Wonderful website. They do these wonderful visualization projects. But yeah, ever since I saw that, I just actively push divergency into my life more, as much as I can practically manage. It's tough sometimes, it is tough sometimes, but I think it is, well, it's provably useful, so when something like that is so clearly provably useful, it seems rather silly to ignore the scientific advice. And that's also why I love using simulated models to prove out a concept, because you can say to someone, here are the rules, here's the sliders, so you can tweak the sliders, here's how you set the initial conditions so you can account for historic shit, and here's what I think. And then you give them that and you let them play with it, and obviously it is possible to manipulate these things, but generally people don't, and it's much harder, and generally people can play it through themselves, work out all the rules themselves and such. So, it's a verifiable, repeatable experiment. And I find it's a really good way of changing people's minds about things. Because, as I say, it's it's just verifiable. And people are like, oh, really? That's really interesting. And also people feel like they've discovered it themselves, which I think helps internalize the lesson. I think it's like, Oh my god, that's good. The coffee's just hit that stage that it needs to be at. That's so fantastic. If you tell someone 2 + 2 = 4, you're telling them a fact. Whereas if you get them to count apples or whatever, you get them a physical linkage, effectively to discover the quality of the addition, then they're much more likely to internalize it. It's really interesting how much better education is now than when we were being taught, because I think a lot of people are like, oh my god, kids these days. Yeah, kids these days are smarter than we were, because turns out we worked really hard and we came up with better ways to teach kids, and the next generation is better off than the current generation. I mean, it's not always true, but on balance, we strive pretty hard to make the future better than the past. And you work that hard for something, you're gonna succeed sometimes. And as I say, we tend to succeed more than we fail. Not a guarantee. There are times when countries slip back, but on the whole, things tend to improve. It's one of those really nice things about life. Things tend to get better. Not always, but that is the trend. The thing that throws us is that trends are slow over time things, and we tend to obsess over the daily wibble wobble, which, it happens. I mean, you want people to obsess over the daily wibble wobble because that's life. And if people don't go, oh my god, this thing's getting worse, we need to make it better, then that trend line could go really badly. But it's good to occasionally zoom out. A big trend to push meditation onto people, and I think it's good because meditative thinking is useful. Meditative thinking is a useful skill to acquire. But, likewise, we don't want to always be meditating. It just wouldn't work. It just would not work. Oh, hold on. Come on, in you go. There we go. Sorry, just pinning a line. But yeah, I think, can I do one more square? I can't do one more square with this one. There we go. Progress has been made. Yeah, I think especially with so what a lot of people don't understand about meditation, for example, is it's not some crazy thing, it's just a reflection. Ah, right, we still have, I think I got the length of floss right. Oh no, I've got to do this section still. That's unfortunate. I'm going to start with this section here because it's much less likely to cause a bother. So the thing that people misunderstand about meditative thinking is that humans are pretty well equipped for it. You don't need much guidance to do it. You just need time and practice. And back in the day when people had to farm a lot, or when they had to do physical labor a lot, or things like cross stitch a lot, you would naturally reflect on things. Now, you need a certain level of input for this to be successful. So, for example, that's why coffee shops and the revolution. It's also why you get so many, through history, you get so many rich scientists and, how do I say this? There is a reason why people of privilege have come up with good ideas throughout history, and it's mostly because they haven't had to stress about where their next meal is coming from. They've got time to be idle. Idle time is very, very useful. But now here's the thing. In modern society, most of us have idle time. We're just very quick to fill it. Oh gosh. Yeah, we're just very, very quick to fill it. So I'm just trying to get through a very dense bit of... Okay. Up and into there. Yay, found it. Got it. And no, this is not one of those, oh my god, phones are ruining our concentration bullshit or whatever. It's like, that shit is just utter bullshit. It's, I mean, it's not utter bullshit in the sense, phones, it's about the behavior of not wanting to sit with your thoughts. You know, and the thing that always baffles me about this whole thing, and I do mean genuinely baffles me, is I thought for the longest time that why would it ever be a bad thing to read a book, as an example. And I realized that if I'm always reading a new book, I'm never thinking about the books I've already read. Sounds really trivial, sounds very self-explanatory, but it's true. You need time to basically think about what you have done already. That's just meditative. That's just meditation. You know, you just need time to contemplate. It is a privilege to have that time. And thankfully, in modern society, most of us can make a bit of it. So now, if you get a chance to work with your hands, or even just do something simple like doing the dishes, rather than listen to the radio or podcast or whatever, you can just take some time and think about your day, what you're going to do with your day. Then, yeah, you've basically done some daily meditation. And the deeper you can sink into that thought pattern, and the more you can formalize it, and the faster you can move yourself from noisy, high-level thinking to that slow, introspective thought, the better. That's basically what training about meditation is. It's about getting faster at clearing your mind, getting faster at, getting sorted. You know, creating the conditions for contemplation. And all that stuff about sitting down on the floor and going all that is about going deeper and giving yourself triggers to cue your brain up. So for example, if your meditation is always washing the dishes, then the moment your hands go into the soap, the moment you start washing those dishes, you'll get a far off look in your eye, your brain will glaze over, you sort of shut down the sensory input as your hands automatically do the activity, just work through it, and you go into the meditative state. You can't do this while you're doing something complex and challenging. You have to do it with something repetitive that your brain can run on autopilot without you getting involved. Turns out that needlework of all descriptions tends to be a good thing for that. And just the sound for me, all that needle pushing through, that thread pulling, immediately settles my mind. Very, very useful. It's one of the reasons why I have been doing needlework a lot in the mornings versus some of the code projects I want to be getting on with, because it's been very useful to have this time to reflect. Now, it's not to say that I won't be doing my code projects and my other stuff, because I want to make that progress. It's more that I have been having to think through a lot of stuff lately, and this is very useful to think things through. It's a useful mode of operation. I don't think this floss is going to make it. I think this floss is going to fall ever so slightly short of its goal. It's unfortunate. That's gonna be a problem for us. Man, I really thought we'd get started on that next color. I don't think. Oh. I don't think we are going to get started on that next color today. I may have to do some cross stitch tonight. Just watch some anime or something. I have a new anime that's not new, but I literally just discovered it, thankfully, through TikTok. And I worry that I'm going to want to read the light novels more than anything, because it sounds like something where the light novels are actually really good. But I should just try watch the anime for a bit. And it's Shocker, another isekai, and it's about a realist hero saving a kingdom, not with heroics, but with modern civil procedures, which just tickles me pink. It really does amuse me. I wonder where that phrase comes from, tickles me pink. I think it's from blushing. Probably. It's probably from blushing, isn't it? Okay. We're going to have to get a little bit more floss. Hey Ray, how you been? As you see, we have moved over to the tubes to save me having to do the whole copy over and everything. It's good to see you again. Oh, it's very good to see you again. Been working on anything yourself lately? I know I've not been streaming in a while. It's good to be back at it. It's good to be back in the habit. And it's good to be productive in the mornings. Really, really good to be productive. Good. Punji! Isekai life. Yeah. So yeah, it's about a realist hero being very practical about how to save this kingdom. I watched the first episode last night, and it's on Funimation, and I hate ads, which means I'm going to have to renew my Funimation subscription. So there's that. But I think I will. And as I say, I can totally see myself ending up reading the light novel, because it just screams light novel potential. But I find it much easier to watch the movie or watch the anime or whatever, and then go read the source material. Because if I do it the other way around, the whole time I'm just like, it wasn't like that in the book. Not totally. So there's a good example is with, I'm not going to be able to do another square with that. With Bookworm, I watched the first season of anime before I got into the book. But then the second season, because I had then read the book, I'm like, but I started out with the anime, so I was fully queued up to love it. I think it would be a similar thing with a TV show or something like that, where you're like, oh, I saw the first season and then went and read the books. The thing that made you fall in love with it was the TV show, so you're not going to judge the TV show too harshly after you've read the books and stuff. Having said that, though, I am very excited for one of my favorite all-time fantasy series to finally be adapted, and they look like they're going to do a good job of it. Wheel of Time. Amazon's doing Wheel of Time. And I am so amped for that. So amped for that. Realist Hero. Yeah. It definitely feels like it was a light novel first. I need to look it up. I don't know if it was. But yeah, I'm really keen to dig into that. Like, really, just as I said, I saw the first episode last night. I was like, yeah, that's gonna scratch an itch. That's gonna be something I enjoy. Hopefully, judging based on the first episode. Okay, there we go. That is we're in a very dense part of thread, so we're having to push through other thread, and there we go. Be very careful how we tension the floss. Very careful how we tension the floss. After this one, I'm going to just cut the... Yeah, I think I can trim that. There we go. Just neaten up the back a bit. But then make sure it has enough tension that we're not having a stitch unravel on us, because that would be bad. That would definitely be in the not good category of things to happen. There we go. Finally decided on when we're going to officially do our housewarming, because we haven't been able to do it with COVID and everything, and we've been in the flat for a year now. So I decided we're going to throw a big ass Halloween party, and we've been umming and ahhing about it because a lot of people don't want to come to a big house party because COVID, and now we're just like, sod it. We're going to organise the thing. If people come, they come. And yeah, be good. We'll be really careful about how we organise it all, and we'll try to keep everyone safe and but honestly, I just need a party. Need to celebrate the new flat. Be something we can get done. Be really good. Just looking forward to that. Organize that. Yeah, be fun. I'm just aware of the time and where we are, and so I'm going to definitely finish this this color up before we finish up for the day, because I want to be queued up for doing the next big area. I don't like to sort of, there's natural breaking points with this kind of work, and I don't want to break when I'm so close to having a color finished. I want to get that rush, that milestone, you know, that ding 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 ding, achievement unlocked. Yeah, that's what I'm pushing for at the moment. There we go. It's really funny because that might actually be enough to finish off this section, but what we're going to do is we're going to use this little bit of additional floss that's running through here, and we're going to use that as a tie off point to secure this, because we're not going to be, this is the last bit of thread in this area that's going in, and so by just knotting it like this, we'll just reduce the chances of a thread pull. Does mean you get a little bit of like a French knot in the back here. It's not quite a French knot, but it gives the same visual as a French knot on the back stitch, but it just sort of tightens it up. Here we go. I think I just need to run that through one more time. Okay, that'll be nice and secure. I'm going to just pop that in there and pop that in there. We'll finish off, and this last bit of floss will be the last thing today. So if there's anything you guys want to say, you better say it, because we're going to be wrapping in not very long. But I mean, that's the background that makes it fun. You know, everyone likes having a demon invasion during your... I saw someone joke in the trailer for Realist Hero that it was basically just someone who had played way too much Crusader Kings. You know, that's one of the joys about fantasy and stuff, is it allows us to take everyday things and recontextualize them. You know, just put them in a different mental framework. Oh dear. Something, oh my God. Give me a sec. I forgot I haven't got the camera plugged in to battery power. Oh, or is it overheating? There we go. Ta-da! There we go. See, even the camera's like, Claire, you've got to wrap up. You've got to wrap up. Yeah, it's really funny. I don't want to talk too much about Bookworm because I'm so deep on Bookworm that anyone who's like not reading the weekly pre-publication translations on J novel is probably well, is definitely behind. And yeah, so I can't talk about Bookworm. I really want to talk about Bookworm. I may talk about Bookworm at some point, but if I do, I have to do it in video form, not live stream, because otherwise I spoil a bunch of people. But anyway, talking about the Realist Hero and stuff, the thing of basically play out political systems or play out mundane concepts in a fantasy setting. It's one of those things that, you know, storytelling and fantasy was made for. Same thing video games were made for. Play, rather, I should say. exploring a problem space under different conditions to understand the underlying systems to which life works. It's like very much that example of the simulation of diversity I was explaining earlier. It's a completely arbitrary mathematical thing, but by building it, we can prove out real life concepts. And the fact that it is an arbitrary thing doesn't make it invalid, because we're proving out the core concepts. And oh yeah, season 3 of Bookworm is gonna be so good. Oh my god. Oh. I'm really worried that, for good reason, I think season 3 of Bookworm might be the last season. Because remember how there's natural stopping points in a story? And I'm like, oh, they're going to stop it there, aren't they? And again, no spoilers. I'm very, very careful of spoilers. But, yeah, I really want them to do more. I really, really want this to be the next, like, One Piece or whatever. But it's not Shonen Jump. And I don't think they will do. However, so without any spoilers, basically the way the light novels work, there's parts. Part 1, which was 2 or 3 light novels, was up until she part 1 was up until she became part of the church. And then part 2 is like 5 novels, I think. I forget the exact number. But yeah, part 2 is it's a bit more than double the size, if I recall. A bit more than double the size of the first one. And that's the next stage of her life. And then part 3, which is where the current English translations are at. Wait, no. Are we in part 3 or in part 4? Anyway, part 3 is the next stage of her life. Yeah, we're still in part 3. Because then part 4 in the light novels, which the English translations haven't got to, but we know that there is a part 4. Minor spoiler there for us, as in like we think is the next stage of our life, and that's even long, like every time it gets like double the length or whatever. So the series is concluding, like everyone like who reads the Japanese version is super amped because the series is coming to an end. The author has said she's ending it. But, yeah, oof. It's one of those that I'm like, there's no way that they can do the full, there's no way they're doing the full light novel run. And that's why I think season 3 might be the last season, because if season 3 ends on the end of part 2, that's a natural stopping point. Whereas if they start biting into part 3, then it's like either they don't finish part 3 or they commit to quite a bit of content. It's hard to tell because there we go. Thank you. It's hard to tell because the manga adapting light novels into manga is honestly the hardest part. Adapting manga into anime, relatively easy. relatively easy. You're going from a visual medium to a visual medium. The pacing of the manga and the anime tends to be very similar, but novels to manga, that's tough. That's really, really tough. So for instance, I don't know of any light novels off the top of my head that go straight from light novel to anime. They all go via manga, as far as I'm aware. As far as I'm aware, they all go via manga. There we go. Need to tie this off. Now that needs a snip snip. And we just need to tie this floss off and we can wrap it for the day. But yeah, it's always a tough challenge. It's always a tough challenge. And I think it's, unfortunately, it's not something that we do in the West as much, which I think is something we could benefit from. I think it's one of the reasons why Marvel's had an easier time of it than so many other adaptations, because going from comics to movies or TV shows, much, much easier. And I've actually heard in the it was in one of the trade presses, I forget which one, but basically Disney was saying that going forward Marvel is basically going to be that. I forget the exact language they used, but they were basically like, we're going to use comics to test out ideas for shows. Not just shows, but franchises, you know what I mean? Because the financial risk of a comic is just so much lower. I mean, on Disney scale, it doesn't even register. And so that's kind of like the future of Marvel, which is a good thing. It means that the comics get to be experimental. It means the comics get to play around with that. Yeah, that whole finale thing. I mean, they weren't expecting to get cancelled, to be fair. They were not expecting to be cancelled. They knew it was a possibility, but they've had that possibility before. They've written cliffhangers, and then they've been able to use the cliffhanger as a reason to come back. But that's when production realities start to impact story writing. Okay. So there we are for today. There's the progress. Switch to this cam because it's easier to get you a close-up on this cam. There is, so Nessie there is coming along rather nicely. We haven't really progressed on any other areas. Nessie's been our main focus. Get that colours and see the back stitch there that we're trying to keep neat. Trying to keep that back stitch neat. But yeah. That is where we are, folks. See you tomorrow. I don't know if we'll be doing cross stitch tomorrow. We may be. But there's a good chance we will be doing something else as well, because this is how it is. Projects, always projects. If you have any projects, please share them. Please come use this space in your morning as a place to get that 1 hour a day in on whatever project you need to get done. Just 1 hour. Doesn't have to be sewing, doesn't have to be code. 1 hour on something you want to do. Okay. Gonna wrap that there. Take care, everyone.